Welcome, Illumineers. It is time to take a rest from your quest and check in at the Lore Keepers Inn. As we head into Lorcana's second set championships and we try to navigate the meta with the newest cards from Ursula's return, it can be a little overwhelming to know what it takes to succeed in a competitive atmosphere. That is why I am thankful that people like today's guests are around to provide some inspiration to the community. Our guest today is somebody that has quickly grown to a crowd favorite in the competitive Lorcana scene, and it's easy to see why. He manages to rise to the top, recently qualifying for the North American Continental Championships, while also bringing us along with him on the journey, and he candidly shares the highs and lows of competitive play. So without further ado, I'm happy to introduce the GOAT himself, Zach Bivens.
Hey, Katie. Thanks for having me in at the Lore Keepers Inn. I'm a big fan of everything you've been doing in the space, so really excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, and I'm excited because, you are a crowd favorite. Like, that's not something when I say what I mean, because, whenever people hear about you doing well, they're like, Zach Bivens. And so that's so fun. That's so fun that, you were a new scene and you already have fans. Like, that's something on you, I think, that if that's the case.
That's pretty crazy,
Um,
but definitely grateful for everybody. Everybody's so nice in this community.
yeah. And I mean, for people who aren't acquainted with you, what is your background with TCGs? And is Lorcana your first one, or is it a second,
Mhm.
or what's kind of the history there?
So I have a really long background in TCGs, so I'll just hit on a couple just so that we're not here all night. So I collected Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh when I was a kid, like from the very first day that they even came out. I was collecting them. So I collected Pokemon just like everybody did. Nobody played the game. Played Yu-Gi-Oh. Then when I think I was around 12 or so, I played this game called Versus System. And it was like Marvel versus DC. So it was comic book stuff basically, but it was
Mhm.
really complex. And I was the only kid ever at tournaments, and I was topping events on the Pro Tour there. So yeah, long history there.
Yeah.
Then when I was a teenager, I was a Pokemon pro, so I traveled all over to those events. I wrote for a website called Six Prizes and World Championships, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
always ranked in the top 10 in the world with Pokemon. Then I played some Digimon a little bit and a few more in between, but now we're here at Lorcana, so all in on Lorcana now.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned, I mean, I think it's interesting that this game has some people who are like, I've never played any TCGs, to some that are kind of coming in. But I think, like, across the board, the exciting part is that everybody can get in on the ground level, because that's
Mm-hmm.
not always the case. It feels like Magic the Gathering, when you're like, I'd like to play. You're like, I don't know where to start. And it kind of, it's been exciting for me, at least, to be able to be like, all right, I know every card. It's possible right now to know every
Mm-hmm.
card, which is not always the case.
I agree. Like somehow Magic is the one game I haven't played. And with 30 years of cards now, even me, like that I've played basically every other TCG ever, I can't even imagine trying to get into Magic. It's just too overwhelming. 30
Yeah.
years of cards to try to learn, no thanks.
Yeah. I collect Pokemon. I've never played, but whenever I've been to Japan a couple times, and the Pokemon
Mm-hmm.
centers, it's so cute. You'll
Mm-hmm.
have the Pokemon centers, but then right next to it, they have like rooms where people are just playing Pokemon, and it looks very competitive. They look like they're having fun, but they also look like there's some kids that could really kick my butt. So
Oh yeah, some of those kids are crazy.
yeah. So, but they did have, I think, it was the Worlds at Yokohama
Mm-hmm.
last
Yep.
year. So that one looked really cool. And so, did you ever do go? You said you went to Worlds.
Yeah. I went to Worlds a few times, so yeah, it was
Yeah,
always
yeah.
fun.
No big deal, just World. Um, so as far as what is it that you like playing competitively? Because obviously some people are kitchen table players, some people play at
Mm-hmm.
League. What is it that you're like, I like getting in a big room with strangers and fighting my way to the top?
Uh, there's just nothing I like more than playing card games competitively. It feels like I was born to do it at this point. Just been doing it my entire life. You get to meet people from all over the world. Like all my best friends play card games, so I
Yeah,
am TCGs at this point.
yeah, and it's a good thing. My husband played Magic the Gathering when he was in middle school and high school. And it's a good thing for kids to play too, because it
Mm-hmm.
makes your vocabulary really good. So he can spell way better than I can. So that's the good news, is it's good for kids' brains. Video games might be bad, but TCGs are good for a growing kid. Um, so how do you decide? So I know that you have played Steel Song. You played it at both Atlanta and Chicago, correct?
Mm-hmm. No.
So
No, in Atlanta, I played Amethyst Steel. So
Oh,
I've played Steel at every single tournament I've played, and
okay.
I've probably played in more tournaments than anyone in the world with Lorcana, and
Probably.
it's been Steel at every single tournament.
Well, and that, I mean, that kind of still leads into it. So what makes you, is it, how do you, is it, like you see movies where they're like, this horse is mine, and they look at them, then connect. Like, how do you decide what kind of deck you like to play? Is it because it's good or because you like it or a little bit of both?
No, I mean it's if I'm going to a tournament, it's because I think it's good, because I think it's the right play. Um, and I kind of have a different process, I feel like, than most people, because most people just play Emerald Steel or whatever is the hot deck at the time. But if you see the decks I'm playing, it's always something ridiculous, like Jiminy Cricket or Pry Lands and Flutes at the same time. So I kind of, when I am looking at my deck for the tournaments, I'm approaching it as how can I attack the meta and get the edge over everybody. So my deck is whatever's good within the context of the current meta, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that, like, knowing that the game that shall not be named is no longer available, I think it's kind of interesting because there's going to be these
Mm,
dark spaces in between tournaments where usually we could see kind of incremental evolving. You could kind of see the whole picture of the meta shifting.
mm-hmm.
And now it's kind of, I think the tournaments set the curve as opposed to the YouTube videos in between the tournament. How is that something that you're nervous about, excited about, that you have that element of surprise? Or is that kind of like, oh, now I have to really, really work hard to know what's coming?
So for me, whatever obstacles it is, I don't even care. Like I'm not one to dwell on anything. I just make the best of it. And so I actually played more paper like in person than I did on that site that shall not be named.
Yeah.
So I think I'll be okay. The main use for me for that was I could throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall really easily and see if anything stuck.
Yeah.
So I would just try crazy decks, and then when something did stick, that's when I would move away from that site and focus on my real life testing. So
Yeah. And that's
just
such a good way.
harder to throw spaghetti at the wall right now.
Yeah. It was like a little training camp where, yeah,
Mm,
really it's kind of, you go in there, the games, like sometimes people would be like, oh, I have the greatest picker, but that doesn't always
yeah, it
translate.
doesn't matter.
Yeah. And it's a good place to look at cards and play. But I think, like you said, in person is really where you get to know your deck.
Mm,
Uh, I think it was exciting seeing you play Steel Song because, I'm a Steel Song
I
player.
know,
I think
yeah.
it's interesting because one thing I was talking to some people about this week is that when you're talking about picking a deck, you also have to talk about like what your tolerance to pain is because I do think there are decks that are more painful to play, whatever that pain is. For example, I don't have the patience for blue. I can't do nothing
Hmm.
for 3 turns. It drives me
Yeah.
insane. And with Amber Steel, like was discussing with you in our coaching session, it's so many decisions. It's a very
Mm.
versatile mid-range deck that you're constantly like, where do I weight this? So, are there decks that you like to play when you're like, I just want to play and I don't want to I don't want to think too hard. Do you ever have those days where you're like, this deck is good because I get to take a little bit of a mental break?
So it's the opposite for me. If a deck is easy, I get bored and
Yeah.
not focused and everything. So I actually do better the more complicated the deck is, because I stay focused the entire time.
That's true. Yeah, because I played briefly the Amber Ruby Mufasa deck,
Mm,
and any kind of zoo. I don't know if that's technically a zoo deck, but any kind of deck where it's just critters, and you're just kind of like, this
yeah,
is this something? It's fun because I mean, sometimes you win and you didn't try that hard, but other times you
yeah,
lose and you couldn't have really stopped it.
yeah.
Um,
Mufasa is so linear. You just play on curve every turn. Play one big dude every turn. So
yeah, yeah, and it works
hmm
50% of the time. So one thing that helped me a lot was the coaching that you provided. What do you like about coaching? Do you think it makes you a stronger player? How do you think it helps the players? Like, what is it about that relationship that you think is good for the sport?
so it definitely is beneficial to me because it'll make me branch out to decks that I wouldn't get as much time with. Like I'm spending a ton of time practicing against Emerald Steel, but I know I'm not going to play Emerald Steel. But if someone wants me to coach them on Emerald Steel, I'm going to play a lot more games to prepare for it. I'm going to look more into it and give it more thought. So it definitely helps me as far as that goes. Um, and I just like that, like I said, I've been doing this my entire life, and I like being able to share that knowledge with everyone, and makes people happy when they win stitches and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's rewarding for both people.
Yeah, it's so nice to be able to talk about somebody. talk about your deck to a person that wants to talk about it with you. That sounds silly, but I
Mhm.
think anybody can relate to being at a store and you want to talk about a match after it's done and the person looks at you like, I'm not enjoying this conversation. Like you want to
Yeah.
talk tech. So it's fun to be in a situation where you're like, no, that's what we're here for. We're talking just the techiest of tech about these cards.
Mhm.
Um, Now this is not a question I got pre-approved for me, but is there any deck you're like, oh, I don't like to play? I know we kind of mentioned like just a pure creature deck. Is there any ink color that you have beef with? I just think I want to know if anyone else has a beef with a color besides me.
I mean, obviously, Ruby Sapphire, it's been the hardest matchup for
It
steel
is.
decks since it exists, so definitely,
Yeah.
like, that's my beef right there, Ruby Sapphire.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. It's good when you see it because then you get to, go up against it. But it is, oh my gosh, it's punishing because
Yeah.
you just know once you get to turn like 7, you're like,
Mhm.
well, I'm going home.
I hope I have at least, like, 15 lore by now, or
I
I'm not
know.
winning.
And even then,
Yeah.
it can be very, very when I was in the quarterfinals, or I guess it was the semifinals because yeah, it was a final four and I got who I was
Mhm.
matched against and it was Amethyst Sapphire and I said, "Good game." I still played, but I was a little bit more relaxed knowing that it would be very unlikely. At that point, I was like, "You know what? I have a stitch. I'm
Mhm.
gonna let that."
Once you have the stitch, nothing matters.
Yeah. Yeah. So these tournaments are long. I think that's one thing
Mhm.
I've noticed is 9 rounds the first day, correct?
Yep.
And then so how do you keep because I mean obviously you're traveling and then you're
Mhm.
playing for an entire day and then you're making it to the second day both time. How do you keep up the stamina and like not lose that just like turn into like pudding brain is what I would have.
Yeah, I'm kinda crazy about it, like, I've thought about it before, but I work out a bunch, go to the gym, all that, literally just so I can be better at card games. Like, I
Yeah.
literally just don't even care otherwise about the gym, but I want to be better at card games.
Yeah.
So, when you're in better shape, you're gonna perform throughout the day, you're not gonna get tired, and your play decline over the day. So, I run a lot, like, yesterday, I ran 13 miles.
Ugh. I didn't mean to
Yeah.
make that face. That's very good. I put my one you might be like, "Wow, look, she runs half marathons." Nope, that's
There
the
you
only
go.
one, but I
You did
did it
it,
and
though,
I was
that's
like
huge.
I went, "Maybe I'll run again," and I haven't ran since. I've stayed true to my word. Running's hard, but the thing is running is very similar to TCGs where it really is just your brain and keeping your brain in the game because it's
Mhm.
really only you making yourself go forward in that situation, which is rewarding and punishing at the same time, I find. Um, which then speaks to, I mean, the happy ending is that you did qualify for
Mhm.
the term North American Continental Championships. That's so
That's a
fun sounding.
mouthful, yeah.
It is. Have they announced where it's held?
We don't know anything about it. No
Oh
location, no
wow.
date, nothing.
You're gonna get an envelope with like no return address, and it's gonna say, "Please show up at this day."
Maybe so.
But so the good news, but everybody who's been in a tournament, I don't think there's a person on the planet who hasn't been to a tournament and came home with results that they didn't want. So
Yeah.
for that bounce back, what is your advice for somebody who is really feeling a setback and they're like, is it the deck? Is it me? Is it the game? Like, what is that headspace like for you? And how do you help other
Yeah.
people through that?
That's a good question. I might ramble on about this one, so I
No, I like
apologize
it.
in advance. Uh, but yeah, it's something that I actually try to talk about a lot during coaching because, especially with it being so many people's first TCG, making top cuts, winning tournaments, it's all a process. It's going to take time. You're not just going to be amazing when you first start. So you have to keep that in perspective and have realistic goals at first. Um, and yeah, no matter who you are, you're going to have bad tournaments, no matter how good you are, anything. So you got to realize it happens to everybody. I've worked a lot on my mindset, but through the years, because when I was younger, I would be really hard on myself if I didn't win a tournament or something and get depressed about it. Like, yeah, it can be hard to deal with. But one of the most important lessons I learned was just that there's another round. There's always another tournament, no matter what. So just keep pushing on. It's going to be okay. You can't let yourself get too high or too low. So, and even though I've worked so hard on this mindset, like I still get these feelings. I just process them faster and move on from them faster than I used to. Like
Yeah.
even in Chicago, like after round 4, I didn't have many points. Like I was not comfortable after round 4, so I was actually pretty sad after round 4. But I just stayed in the right mindset, took it a round at a time, and somehow ended up as the number 1 seed overall. So
Yeah, and I think that's the big difference with these, set championships versus the challenge events is
Hmm.
it's so hard to zoom out and see what the big picture is until, you really are at the end of the day, I think, because, that was one thing at said championships. People would go in corners and be doing math. They're like, well, if you get this, and you really can't do that math, I don't think, as easy, at least, in a big room like a challenge. Um, and yeah, and I think you mentioned like, highs and lows. I think
Hmm.
sometimes winning also can be hard because then, especially with you, I mean, people are cheering for you. So then that feeling, I mean, I'm sure that has to be something where you're like, oh, like people are watching. Because if I lose, no one cares. But it has to be at some level of knowing that, um, you know, doing good means that maybe you expect that from yourself moving forward, which is
Yeah,
good.
in Atlanta, round 9, I was at table 1, and we didn't ID, and there was, I don't know, 50 people watching around. So yeah, it can get crazy sometimes, but it's
Yes.
a good problem to have. So
Yeah. Yeah. It can be, I think, it's exciting because I think I mentioned in the beginning that you're candid about the highs and lows. And I think that's what
mm,
people respond well to is because when you scroll TikTok on any kind of tournament weekend, you're like, wow, everyone won. That's crazy. But like,
right,
that's
yeah,
not the case. It'd be crazy. I mean,
yes,
statistically, everyone walked in there at least thinking they're probably going to do okay. Um, so it's nice to see that doesn't, every day doesn't end the way you hope.
no,
Um,
not at all. Like I said, it literally doesn't matter who you are. You're gonna have bad days. I was ranked number 9 in the world in Pokemon, and I finished almost dead last one time in a tournament. So it doesn't even matter. Sometimes you're gonna
yeah.
have those days.
Yeah. I had a heart to heart with some people in my league because there's this one guy that he kept winning tournaments and he was a nice
Mhm.
guy. But then what happened is he got second place. Everyone's like, yeah, you finally beat him. I'm
Second
like,
place.
yeah, not, but it was like, but people were so happy that they beat the guy that always wins. And I'm
Yeah,
like, I think that person's a human. We should probably, so it's like, you get it both sides because people
yeah.
root for you when you win. But then if someone beats, then suddenly you stop being the underdog. So I guess that's just my PSA for listeners. It's like, probably never cheer for anyone losing. That's probably a good, healthy thing.
That's true, and that's something people don't think about. Like, if you do have people cheering for you, there's also maybe an equal amount of people that want to see you fail, just because they're
Yeah.
jealous or I don't know, whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's good and bad, unfortunately, in
It
everything
is
you do.
interesting. There is online discourse. Like I will pull up Twitch, which is probably the first mistake is to pull up the comment section on
Yeah.
Twitch. But you just read about all this drama, and I'm like, how could you possibly come up with all these stories about people you've never met? And just,
Hmm.
um, but that's why I like this community. Is it's new. I think it's a nice mix. Have there been some familiar faces where you show up to tournaments and it's kind of like meeting old colleagues?
Yeah. So his name's Alex Brusso. He plays Pokemon, or he plays Lorcana now, and we played Pokemon. What is it? More than 10 years ago together. So seeing
Yeah.
him in Atlanta for the first time in forever was awesome. And I
Yeah.
actually met up with some people in Chicago. Uh, Pokemon people might know this name, Jason Klaczynski, 3-time world champion. He lives 10 minutes away from the convention center. So me and him and Alex had dinner in Chicago.
Wow.
So that was really, really awesome. I would have
That
flown
is
to
cool.
Chicago just to see him. So
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, some of the brains that are good at TCGs are just fascinating because I mean, that's probably one of the reasons I will never be a top TCG player is because, you got the, like the Queen's Gambit is what I imagine what's going on. Like, I don't know if you've seen that show, but she's like
yeah,
imagining in her mind and projecting it. That's what I'm
yeah, I've
imagining.
got aerials on the wall right now.
Yeah, right. And they're exerting and,
Hmm.
um, but yeah. So I guess I just have a couple of rapid fire questions. What are some ways that you would recommend for somebody? Like, let's say they're like, I don't want to do coaching because I'm scared or I don't like, what is some ways that you think are a good way to get better at a deck for just people at home, your common folk?
Okay, literally just play as many games as you can, which is the easy answer, but you have to do them focused. Like, this is something I would say in the coaching every single time. When you get on the website, do not be on your phone and scrolling too. It's so easy to be playing online and also on your phone or something, and that's going to do you no good. So you have to stay focused and try to learn something in your testing. So play games and make them count is the
Yeah.
number one thing. And then take in all the information you can. YouTube has so much information. Join Discord servers. Do everything you can. Just work as hard as you can. Put in the work and you will get better.
Now, on the flip side, is there ever a time where you're like, you know what? It's like, is there ever a point where you're like, you probably should switch decks? Like, do you ever like see someone getting so frustrated that you're like, maybe it's not the worst thing to just say, I don't like this deck? Do you ever suggest that people for just break up with the deck?
Yes, you have to break up sometimes.
Okay.
Just a part
Yeah,
of life. So
I
yes.
know. Yeah, Steel Song, I think, will always be the Steel Song in my heart. Right now, I'm too afraid. I couldn't do it. I'm too scared. It's so scary in the meta right now because there's just so many more
Mm-hmm.
powerful decks that are just consistently hitting hard. Um,
Yeah, I didn't see a single other one in Chicago. I'm sure there were other ones, but I literally didn't see another one in Chicago. So
yeah, I think it's the bravest deck. When I see it, I'm like, there goes a hero. But that might be self-aggrandizing. Um, but yeah, are you headed? I guess the last question: Are you headed to Dallas?
yeah, I am headed to Dallas for sure. Booked and ready to go.
That's exciting. I detect a small drawl. Are you from the South?
I'm in North Carolina.
North. Okay. All right. So over there is the north of the South. So yeah, that makes sense.
Kind of.
So yeah, but that's still far away. That'll
Yeah.
be my first Lorcana challenge. So I'm gonna be there. I'm
Hey,
gonna
that's
have a deck.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm between, Amethyst Emerald and the classic Amethyst Ruby because that deck is just it does exactly what it says on the label. And is it
Mm-hmm.
the most fun deck? No, but it is. I would say one of the best decks to play if you're like I don't want to. This is so I'm gonna probably get people won't like this, but I will say it's one of the less stressful decks to play in my opinion because it's just
Mm-hmm.
control, just ruin the other person's day.
I think people will just have a bad taste in their mouth
Yeah.
from sets 1 through 3. It's not as
Yes.
bad anymore. I think Ruby
Exactly.
Sapphire is what you should hate now.
It's true. Yeah, I think set 2
Mhm.
is just so oppressive. But then I played
Yes.
it and I was like, wait, now I know everyone's high on the Elsa and Aladdin sauce. This is so fun to have that. Now they're gone, but they'll be back one day. I'm confident that cards will come back in vogue. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess I will let you go, but are there any other things that you would like to say to the competitive community, inspirational words, or maybe I did see I was on a live stream in Traverse Town. He did like a heel, like an almost wrestling
I
thing. He says,
know.
"Oh, and I see you, brother." He didn't say it in the southern accent. I'm embellishing that part, but he was like, "And I'm gonna beat you, Zachary Bivens." And I was like, "Oh, is
I
this
know,
the?"
right? It's just
Yeah, I was like,
wrong. It's rude.
I know. I was like, you can't be a
No.
heel in Lorcana, but I guess if he wants to.
So we've played in either 3 or 4 tournaments in round 4 exactly now. So,
Wow.
and
So I
I
guess yeah,
mean,
there's lore there. There is.
I
I
mean,
mean,
I
now
have
it
to
is.
say I haven't lost yet. So, I
Uh,
mean,
all right.
I don't know Traverse Tavern.
All
I don't
right.
know.
I did say at the end when I signed off, and I said, "And I will not beat you." That's my promise to you. Is I probably won't. I'm
Mm.
ready to drop out and do some side events and try to get a little
You got to
T-shirt.
hang in there. You can absolutely get 30 points and get those 20 tickets.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Gosh, I want that T-shirt because it's so hard. They make you work for it. You can't just buy a shirt. They don't want your
I
currency. They want
know.
your time.
And when you're on stream, so if you're wearing logos like with this Under Armour logo, they would make me cover it up. They would give me another t-shirt, but they don't let you keep the t-shirt.
You,
Like,
I bet you could do something. Like do something. Do it where they're like, I don't want it back, sir. Just drool something. Maybe I don't know. That's not the greatest advice, but
I'm going to try
um,
it though.
yeah, right. Because I saw that. I saw somebody where they were wearing 2 shirts and then their deck, they were using the Lorcana branded sleeves. And no shade to Ravensburger, but I don't think there's a professional player in the world that would ideally choose the texture of the officially branded sleeves. It is.
No, nobody that's going to win a tournament is playing with those
No,
sleeves.
it is strangely sticky, which is not a texture that you would like in a TCG environment. But
Oh, yeah.
um, well, I appreciate you coming by and talking. I think it is so fun to see people succeed at it. It's inspiring. It's so fun it feels like it's like the Super Bowl once a month where now I just get to log in and have games. I'm sad that you don't get that experience. You don't get to relax and watch the games because you're there stressing, but it's
Yeah.
fun for people at home. I will say that. The community thanks you for providing us Saturday and Sunday entertainment.
Well, I definitely appreciate the community. Everyone is so good. This community is better than any other card community. So definitely
Yeah.
love everybody and appreciate it.
I hope we can keep it up. We're gonna have to have
Mhm.
like a niceness please. Somebody's meeting be like, nope, sorry. Unfortunately, we've already been dubbed the nicest community and we have to keep that up.
Mhm.
So before I say goodbye, where can people follow you, track your adventures?
So you can find me on Twitter, is where I mostly am, at ZachBivens1, and go to YouTube, Lorcana Castle. I'm working on a video now. I know people keep saying, I wish you'd upload more. I'm working on one now to recap Chicago, so I'll try to do more there. So those are the two places.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, before I made videos, I was like, yeah, let's put up a video. It is so much work. It
Gosh,
is.
yes.
It is just, it's a lot to remember to make content, then to remember to write stuff down, then you have to edit it. So
I have no idea what I'm doing, so if you're
it's,
lucky that there's 3 up there.
yeah, it's a lot. So are you on a team? Like, I know that there people have groups. They're like, this is my group of people. Are you in a group of people?
No, a lot of teams keep trying to get me, but
Oh, I like that.
no.
That's so fun. It's like,
Yeah.
that's okay. Well, keep that. That's the intrigue for the season. We'll see, like, at the end of nationals, be like,
Yeah. A lot of people have tried, but maybe one day.
all right. Well, I'll keep watching your career with great anticipation. So, well, thank you. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on another episode of The Lore Keepers In. If there's anything that you would like to hear me talk about, please feel free to email me at contact@thelorekeepersin.com or on Twitter, on Instagram, and the social media will be listed below. And as always, thank you for hanging out with us today. We are always happy to have you stop by on wherever your quest may take us. And if you can't find us, just take the second start of the right exit and head straight on till morning.